All right. Hopefully everybody can see screen online, and it looks I can see it in person, so I can validate there. You got the presentation there?
I do.
All right, we'll kick it off. Thank you again, everybody, for coming. Sorry, no food again tonight. Got to get it up into double digits before I can justify bringing drinks, and it's mostly the toll on my back in between the parking garage and here with pizzas and drinks in a cooler. So I'll turn this microphone on and set it closer to here. So that. Questions? All right, well, thanks again for coming. Let's skip to the preamble and go through this really quick. I'm excited to hear about the DevOps Center. So tonight we are joined by Ian Gotts. Ian, are you still there?
I am still here, yes.
Outstanding. Let me triple check and make sure. I think I made you co-host when you started.
Yeah, I can share a screen, yeah.
I'll do it again. It does now say, okay, good stuff. Sorry, Zoom fun. All right, so we'll just go through some quick alerts, heads up, and the regular announcements. Moyez and I are jointly running this group. Moyez founded it many years ago, and he's let me take over for the past 3 years. So we are always open to ideas on content and on what you're wanting to learn, what you would want to see, what you think we should show, if you have something you want to present, news to share, or any other opportunities. Last month, we talked to Dr. Bose about doing a mock interview for students here. We did it at the UNT Dallas School of Business. We interviewed some 20, 30 people and got to give them a lot of, okay, you need to do this in your interview process. You need to be really polished on that. Do not talk about the fist fight you got in at your last job. That's probably something you should leave off. And it was I think we skipped people forward quite a few bad interview experiences. So it was fun, especially for people that didn't. I realized how blessed I was that I had friends that were in industry that could share knowledge about what to do and what to say in an interview. And because I was exposed to people that just didn't have that background. And so I was really glad to be able to do that. So I want to do that again. So I'm hoping we clone that program here at UTD. Sorry, did you have a question, Lawrence?
Well, I say there's a place in Plano that called the Pit Crew that does the mock interviews. That it's a volunteer thing. It's all free on, I think it's Tuesday mornings, where you give them the resume and the job description, and they will give you a tough mock interview, and with the option to record it. And then the goal for them is to be harder on you than what a real recruiter may be, and with that to get you flustered and to show you the skills of how to get over answering those questions without being flustered. So I'll look for a link to their sites to post here in the chat.
That's great, thanks. If you don't mind hopping in on our online Twitter frenzy, I have a canned tweet. I usually try to have a little bit of fun with. I was in a little bit of a rush today, so it may not be my funniest or most guffaw dad humor tweet, but it always helps us get the word out and get more people here. So if you've got time and don't mind doing the Twitter thing, that should get what you want. Don't worry, I'll give you all time to do it. Go ahead. It's all right. I'll wait. Thanks. Hopefully that works. It's just a fun URL hacking. So job seekers, please feel free to put your information in over the chat. We have some more attendees. Make sure we're getting everybody there. There's Nathan.
Or could you maybe share the link for the chat as well with us, so we could put our information in that?
I will.
We have messaged you on LinkedIn. We both added you.
Sorry.
Oh, we both added you on LinkedIn and we can share it.
Sure, yeah, find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, on it.
Okay, yeah, just okay. I'll probably do it after. That's a little bit more multitasking than I can do while I'm talking, or I can do it maybe while Ian is doing that. Sorry, a little Zoom housekeeping here. All right. So there were a lot of announcements at Dreamforce. One of the bigger ones we're going to discuss here tonight. Ian has some news for us. Hey, Mr. Thanawa. Yes, how are you? There is have the link up there for the developer podcast. Code Builder is another big thing that went live. There's a web-based VS Code IDE out there. So I'm excited about getting that. I love the developer console. I'm not a local IDE person. I like them to be lightweight and fast and always available. The other big news I have, sorry, a little self-plug. The first couple chapters of my book for O'Reilly are now published. I am hoping that is will be something that newcomers to the ecosystem can make use of. I am trying to write the book from an enterprise architect's perspective that doesn't know Salesforce. So I'm trying to decode Salesforce in terms of traditional and outside of the ecosystem, you know, getting past all the architecture. So that will hopefully be done shortly by the end of the year, but it's up now. It's only the first 3 chapters are up, so I wouldn't even recommend going. I'm not even plugging it. It's just exciting news. And I'm always happy to talk about the topic. So grab me if you have any ideas, or I wish somebody told me that this was this when I got there. My favorite anecdote from the book is I spent probably a month trying to figure out how to get my account unlocked. And I kept asking people about, okay, well, how do you update your account? Oh, well, which company do you work for? Well, that shouldn't matter. My username and password is this. What's my account? Well, are you a contact? No, and I've just, the lingo for account has always been credentials. Everywhere except for Salesforce or inside sales, account doesn't mean a company you service. So that's the kind of stumbling block I'm trying to sweep out of the way for people in this book. People who know Salesforce, it's probably not, unless you're trying to excel up and want exposure to some of those bigger terms, like what is big data, how do the components of Salesforce relate to other big topics inside of, you know, enterprise scale architecture. What's the big deal with big objects? Why are people talking about it? It's just a different type of object. It actually has a lot more meaning. And so I'm trying to surface that up. So intro architects can also have it there. But anyway, I'm excited about it. So I get to put a slide in there.
Well, do you have a chapter outline that you can share with us?
Let me see if I can. I mean, obviously I do. I don't know what I'm supposed to be able to publish yet. The table of contents. Yes, I do.
The group would really like to kind of see what you're taking.
We're recording.
Chapter outline. Whenever you're allowed to publish it.
I will flash it up there. And if I will ask forgiveness later.
Forgiveness rather.
Mm-hmm. So. Physical functioning, internal, external entity. I've got to rename some of these chapters because they just don't really sell what is in there. I got that feedback recently. MDM, governance, data loader, MuleSoft, Jitterbit, Chatter, Slack files. All the different.
Have something in there for everyone, for managers, for architects, for budding developers.
Yeah, I'm just trying to do it. It's basically a city view of Salesforce. It's a higher level. These are the shapes. If you didn't know the shapes were there because you lived in them.
Yeah.
You live in a shape. And I can hear in my head daily, everybody arguing with me, well, not really, and it's not really, well, except on Friday, well, if you can. It's like, okay, look, you have to start drawing the borders somewhere, find out where the elbows are, the corner pieces. But it's been fun. I did not see Waqas join. I don't think we will have a security chat tonight. I did hear Waqas's company is Digicent has a security scanning tool. It dives deep into modules and lines of code and actually suggests, it'll talk about vulnerabilities in libraries. It'll talk about what you're doing within your code and suggest ways to fix it. So it's a really, it's a neat tool. I've seen it a couple of times. It will cause us fun to listen to talk about security. But they recently have partnered and their tool now works with Capado. So if you've worked with PMD inside of the IDEs, PMD, their code scanning tool is a similar add-in module for the Capado infrastructure. I know it runs separately as well, but it's nice to see it hit first order with Capado, which for a long time was my guess on the next acquisition by Salesforce. Tonight's topic notwithstanding. Moyez, time for the Moyez minute. Anything new from you, sir?
Only one thing I really want to talk about today, and that is our next stand-up. I've had conversations with a group that over the years has been close to my heart, and it's gonna be okay group. I think some of you may know who they are. We did a stand-up for them a few years ago. This is a group that rescues kids and young adults who've succumbed to human trafficking. They're Dallas-based for the one reason that Dallas is a human trafficking hub. Most of us don't know that. The group has grown quite a lot since we last worked with them, and their needs on Salesforce kind of next level stuff is there. So some of you know my daughter Sarah, she's kind of caught up. She really has taken not just to the Salesforce aspect, but side of what this group is doing, but really the larger conversation of how do we one individual, how does one person turn this mess around? And Tanya Stafford, who's the principal there, has taken on this challenge. It's a story that will touch your heart. And we're going to do the next level of stand-up for them.
Outstanding.
I think we're going to do it in February or March. I don't know if Sarah's online with us. Is Sarah anywhere on the?
What's that?
Is Sarah online with us?
I don't see her.
Okay, I'll make sure that she circulates the information. First time coming back from COVID, yes, they were going to do a stand-up in person, the 3-day type events that we used to have in the past. Salesforce has offered to allow us to do this at Salesforce Tower. Now, Dallas, we're still trying to figure out if the venue is big enough or whether we should do it in a venue like this. Sarah's going to circulate a sign-up sheet. But again, here's what it is, right? February or March, we're going to select a date in between those 2 months. Full-blown stand-up will start Friday, like 10 o'clock, right? We'll go through Sunday night. You come and go as you want, and no experience required. We love you there. There's a lot of work to be done. And prior to that, the board and some of the group members and we'll all come together and decide what the feature set is that I very clearly remember what moment of privilege here, that you did the data load for them, right? Data load is the last thing that happens on Sunday, and we're always very stingy about who touches real life data. And Paul sat down that day. It was raining outside. Look, we had a thunderstorm going on, and Paul said, give it to me. Give it to me. I'm going to do the entire data load myself. So we had an exciting time. The last time we did this, I'm looking forward to doing it again. Exciting news, great organization. I mean, it's going to touch your heart.
She's so inspiring. Yeah, she kind of started it basically by herself. So if you look for as an opportunity, I didn't know very much then. I knew how to run data loader. I also knew I knew how to run a flash drive in Excel and do queries. And when you're sitting in a room talking with a woman sharing very personal stories about being trafficked herself and what you're doing, and the thumb drive you have is a list of women that are in danger, and their location is a tightly kept secret, that makes you take it very seriously. I took that drive, I copied the structure of it, I made a copy, I put the structure on my laptop, and nobody was touching that data. We worked with the structure. We got it all loaded. There were people there that could help, and then they hopped to other places where they were helping. Great opportunity to learn. And at the end of the day, you actually accomplished something that you can feel good about. So I would very much look forward to getting to work with her again. So thank you. That's great. Jade is online. I was hoping she'd have some updates about things going on for our military members and MilSpouse, but I don't see if she's there. She may have just signed in to support in spirit. I wanted to show her on camera my Pitfall socks. I have my Activision Pitfall socks on today. There was a thread going around talking about favorite video games, and I have a little bit of problem with video games. And a long history. So anyway, intersection of gaming and Salesforce. All right, so November, we'll probably set up a Dreamforce quick tapes. I'm still looking for a speaker that can go through and talk about all the major announcements. We don't usually have a So Nana, Barb, and Carol and I are trying to put something together. It'll probably be in Addison. So if you're interested in coming out and meeting quite a bit more people, that'll be going on soon. So that's still TBD. Watch the website and your email. You should get emails from this if you're registered and signed up with the site. So you should get the regular notification. And we had one person join that missed all the introduction. If that was on purpose, tell me to move on by, but.
Oh, no, it wasn't on purpose. I can't find it.
So who are you and where do you work for and what do you work in?
My name is Mary Ann Newman. I'm a technical architect
At
at Salesforce.
Salesforce? Great. Nice to meet you. Accenture, Salesforce, Thonawalla Digital, Goldman Sachs. UTD, Citibank, UTD's behind you, Citibank, Shell Black, we know Shell Black, and ATX and 2 students. So I'm just making sure everybody knows everybody. So you can talk and network and what have you. So yeah, developer, to CPQ, integrations, and VP. Role, what, you're technical architect? Outstanding. All right, Ian, if you are ready, we are dying to hear about DevOps Center. You're on mute, sir.
I'm just putting myself off mute. Fantastic. Okay. Thank you so much for inviting me. First of all, let me share a screen.
You should be able to, since I made you here.
Yeah. There we go. So should have a big purple screen up there.
I got it.
Perfect. Okay, good. 3 numbers. Bit of background on me. 10 years in Salesforce as a partner, 20 years as a Salesforce customer, 30 years as involved in development, starting my career really with Accenture back in 1986. So I've been around business analysis world. I'm not a developer. I can do some development, but everyone in the room has got way more experience than me. So this is not going to be a developer discussion. This is going to be about how DevOps Center works and thinking about how we get the best out of it. Again, happy to take questions. This is all about DevOps Center, which is a Salesforce product, which is now in beta, due to go live GA sometime end of December-ish. I was talking to the product manager, Karen Fidelac, late last week just to get the latest update. They're expecting GA sometime in December. There are a bunch of organizations already using it on the pilot and then now in beta. So again, make this as interactive as you want, so we can start to get people's questions answered, because I think that's really the part of this that's important. So, so the first thing I think is, what is DevOps Center? This is, I've got 3 things, sort of vision, opportunity, and the implications. This is Karen's vision. DevOps Center is all about change and release management and introducing DevOps best practices to the entire community, regardless of whether you're on the low code or the pro code spectrum. So really, if you're a developer, if you're used to moving stuff between sandboxes using scripts, you'll kind of go, what's the point of this? There is a whole world out there who don't use sandboxes, who use change sets, who don't even know what source control is. When you do the numbers, there are, I know, 150, 200,000 orgs out there. There are only 100,000 orgs that move data, move metadata between sandboxes and production. So the rest are either not making any changes or they're doing it straight into production. Scary though that is. If you start thinking about that 100,000, probably 15, 20,000 are using scripts. They're using Click Deploy, which got acquired by Capado. They're using Gearset, AutoRabbit, Flowsum, Prodly, or something for moving stuff around. So DevOps Center is really the replacement to change sets. Okay, but more importantly, it's actually driving a change in behavior from the way that the admins are working to bring them closer to the way that the development world would work. Thinking about source control, thinking about moving things through a pipeline. So it's a bigger change to admins and analysts than it is to developers. It actually should be bringing them closer together. Okay. The other thing is it's completely free. Change sets are a basket case. You can't possibly charge someone to go from change sets to something else when change sets just don't do a decent job. So this is a free product. The first release will be free forever, I've been told. So this is not bait and switch. There will be future features which will be paid. So at the moment, it is the only source control system it supports is GitHub. So if you're using Bitbucket or GitLab, that will come in the future. That may well be a paid product. I don't work for Salesforce, so I don't have to do the safe harbor, but the Karen on stage has said a number of times, the GitHub release will be free and will be free forever. So there's no risk in terms of people moving. So if you've got admins in your organization who are going, well, we hate change sets, then they need to take a look at DevOps Center, because this is the future of development. Okay, so I won't go in lots of detail around the product, but some principles behind what's been built. The first is we're actually moving changes using basically a click type approach. So it's using, as it said, you can see the picture up on the right-hand side. It is an application sitting inside Salesforce. It looks like it's written in Lightning, although it isn't. But it's actually clicks to move things around. We're not running scripts. This should feel like the experience of configuring a Salesforce with clicks, not code. That's the first thing. It's about driving changes through a pipeline. The other thing is it's the back end is connected to GitHub. So you shouldn't need to understand GitHub to be able to use this. Okay, big caveat, the moment there's an error of some sort that it throws, it will spit out something that's a message from GitHub. And I know the DevOps team are working to try and catch those errors and make more sense of them. But the moment you go off the happy path, you are into getting messages from GitHub, which are sometimes unintelligible to the admin. Also, you've got to bear in mind the admin world out there, they use change sets and they go, oh, I pushed a change and it worked. DevOps Center has got a bit more rigor around it so that it will throw up errors that change sets shouldn't have let through but did, as in you pushed a change, the change set just went and said, okay, I don't know whether this will work or not. I'll put in a new page layout even though the field doesn't exist. I'll happily do that. DevOps Center has actually got a bit more testing, which it won't do that. So that's why it starts to throw errors. The most common error is a rebase error, which is you're trying to push something which requires something else to have been pushed first. So you may find if you've got admins in your organization, they start using DevOps, they'll be coming to you going, help, what's that will mean? I have no idea what I'm meant to do with that. Third point there is about moving things around with clicks. It shouldn't be running scripts. It's starting to help you move your way through a pipeline. And then the whole aim is to try and make both the pro code developers and the admins work to a common set of principles, common source code. So it's trying to drive everyone to be working in a better, more consistent way. Salesforce over the years has become more and more sophisticated in moving into enterprises. I mean, I can't see you all, but I heard some major organizations there. I heard Goldman Sachs, Citigroup, Accenture, big organizations who are now using Salesforce. This is not 5 users in a corner having fun. This is actually a full-on enterprise application, and we need to treat it as such. And this is trying to encourage everyone to actually up their game and think about DevOps in a better way. There were a bunch of questions in the chat. Let me just see if I need to pick up on anything there. Right, okay. Those are total numbers. Free and beta, quick question, is it free and beta? Free when it goes GA. So what we're seeing now is not just beta. What you'll see when it goes to GA, it will be free forever. Why isn't Bitbucket free? I think Salesforce are having enough trouble making it work for GitHub. They're going to get that working first. The suggestion was future releases would be paid for, and things like integrations to Jira and Bitbucket are likely to be an upgrade. If any of you, we've all been around for Salesforce forever. They are never short of finding ways of actually charging us for things. Does it deal with merge conflicts? No, you're not this is not, you'll see as we work through it for, this is not GearSet. This is not Capado. It is simply a nicer way in release 1 of actually moving changes around and getting that to work. Right, okay, let's keep going. Right, so they're the vision. That was the vision. They're the features. I think there's a massive, massive opportunity for organizations for DevOps Center. The opportunity is not DevOps Center itself. The opportunity is the fact that it's forcing people to work in a different way. And therefore, this is a chance to re-engineer people's DevOps processes to make sure that we actually are driving some best practices in, which probably aren't there. Salesforce has changed dramatically in the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years. If we have, if people have been just hacking, not putting changes straight in through production, or they haven't done any decent analysis, that's now unacceptable with the level of risk with organizations. Therefore, this is the chance for people to start to rethink how they do the whole of the change cycle from I have an idea right through to it's now in production, and use DevOps as the catalyst to rethink that and actually buy yourself some time to re-engineer that rather than just pushing DevOps Center in on top of change sets. If you do that, yeah, you have a better experience than change sets, but you've missed a massive opportunity to get your senior management engaged in why you actually need to do things differently. Right, so next slide. Yeah. So let's just think about what that opportunity is. Up on that slide there, we've got ALM, so application lifecycle management. So the typical way that people think about it is plan, code, merge, test, release. The planning phase actually is probably in time as big as the rest of the phases put together. But this is a very dev-centric view. And that orange line is the important handover from we understand what we want to go and build to push it into your dev environment, whether that is DevOps Center, Capado, it doesn't matter. But that's a critical handover. That handover is your user stories, or bizarrely what DevOps Center is calling a work item. So a work item and a user story are synonymous. And we live in the world of, I mean, Elements, our product, is all around the front end. It's about understanding what you should be building, capturing requirements, mapping business processes, drawing architecture diagrams, understanding what's in the org, building user stories, creating those releases, and then validating the user story and giving it a risk, at which point you can then hand over whatever you've built or think you need to build across to the development team. And we call that build the right things. We see too many examples of people going, oh, just add a field, just add a pick list. So this is the upfront analysis that you need to do, and we need to be a lot better at that. And I see that doesn't actually happen very often in organizations. Some of you may think back 2 or 3 years, there was something called org confessions, something we launched. Unfortunately, got us put on the naughty step by Salesforce. They weren't very happy about it, but it wasn't really poking fun at Salesforce. It was actually saying, these are all the problems that are occurring because people are not thinking through how they should use Salesforce. There's nothing to do with the platform. It's actually everything to do with the way they use it. And we did some root cause analysis of the 1,200 org confessions we got. Number 1, poor business analysis. Number 2, poor architecture. Number 3, no documentation. Number 4, no DevOps or methodology. And you can see over the last 3 years, all of those have been addressed by Salesforce. But there's a business analysis certification. There is obviously Parker Harris is really pushing hard on driving the importance of architecture and documentation. Products like us exist. And we've now got DevOps Center. So we've got a whole bunch of stuff now, which is that Salesforce is pushing to make sure that before we start building, we've got a better understanding about what we should build. As actually Megan just put up there, Seattle, November the 16th and 17th, there's DevOps Dreaming, which is being hosted by GearSet. Elements is a sponsor. I'll be speaking about it. But again, there's a real energy and momentum behind having better DevOps. But tied to that is also making sure we build the right thing. So then we get to do what DevOps is, which is about building the things right. So quick question to the audience. What are the 4 metrics that people typically talk about for DevOps?
Audience?
Not a rhetorical question. What are the 4 metrics that everyone talks about?
Defects.
So
Yeah.
how quickly we release, time to deploy, how quickly we release, how often we release, how often we break the org, and how long it takes to get back to normal. They're the 4 metrics that get talked about a lot. So thank you for the people who posted the answers in there. So how quickly we release, how frequently we release. Then the other 2 are how often we break the org and how quickly we get back to normal. Those 2 are kind of weird, isn't it? It's like having a Tinder profile that says I've been divorced 4 times, but I get over it really quickly. Those last 2 metrics shouldn't be numbers we should be worrying about if we have done decent conflict checking up front, if we've done a decent analysis about the org. They ought to be small numbers. So what we're talking about is that, let's not worry about that. That's okay. So the reason we built an integration, the reason I'm talking is we built an integration to DevOps Center to do all those things up front, so we can then push a decent quality work item into DevOps Center. Incidentally, we do the same thing for GearSet, for Flowsum, for AutoRabbit. We've got an integration with Capado to do the same thing. We've simply replicated that integration to the DevOps Center. But in doing that, we spent a lot of time really diving into DevOps Center to understand how it worked. I think a lot of the conversations we had maybe changed the scope of it, or at least helped the DevOps Center team understand some of the challenges that people were facing. So this is, I think, everything I've talked about is summarized by this picture. The whole idea of shift left. It's a lot cheaper to fix and find problems earlier in the life cycle. If you understood that flow kicks off 2 more flows and then actually kicks off an integration via MuleSoft into NetSuite. If we knew that during the analysis, it would be way cheaper to fix than when we actually go live in production and everything breaks because we can't get our end of month reconciliation done and everyone's running around with their hair on fire. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to pull a lot more of this analysis up front. And the reason I think it's hard to do this is that you've got Salesforce out there going, it's easy, you can just build stuff. I mean, people can build things in a day, we can get it. I watched a video, some people built stuff and they've already got it live in production in a day. In practice, with complex org, it takes longer than that. So you've got pressure from business users going, just build stuff. I've watched the videos, I've been to Dreamforce, I've been to the latest event. You can build stuff really quickly. Why aren't you building it? And just because you can build it quickly doesn't mean you're building the right thing quickly. The whole idea of, okay, well, if it wasn't right, we'll build it again, we'll build it again, and build it again. That is an unacceptable approach now when we're building enterprise applications. And we need to rein these business users back in and go, we are going to do decent analysis to make sure we're going to build the right thing. Only when we're sure about it will we then build it. Quick story about our own implementation. We were about to go and make some changes. The team went through, they did the analysis, they went through, they built the process maps, worked out how the process was going to change. They looked at the architecture. They looked inside the org using Elements to understand the implications of the changes. They then worked out the risk of those user stories, went back to the business and said, it's going to take 4 weeks and cost $20,000 to do this. Do you still want us to do it? And the business went, no, if it's going to cost that much and take that long, there are other things we'd rather do. So all of that time in analysis was wasted, but it wasn't, because actually we made sure we were doing the right things for the business. It wasn't wasted time. So again, you're going to have to push back on your business users by going, don't worry, we will get to the answer faster for you. Trust us, we need to do this work up front. And that, I think, is quite a big shift in terms of the mentality often, with business users going, just make the change. It can't be that hard. And that word just is really scary. Just make the change. So a little bit about Elements. Part of what we do is we pull all the metadata out of an org and actually build all the dependency trees and build out all the metadata dictionaries. We are seeing some truly horrendous orgs out there. I think I looked at the numbers the other day. We've analyzed 15 billion metadata items. So we were looking at an org the other day. Actually, it's one of our consulting partners brought it to us. The opportunity object had 257 record types. It had 130 pick list fields. Some of those fields had over 100 pick list values. So for those of you who understand how it works, every pick list value has to be assigned to a record type. There were over 5 million mappings. Okay. They were trying to merge this org with another org, which was really simple. Oh, by the way, how many record types had any data in them? They had no idea. Luckily, Elements is able to tell you that. Only one. So again, it's trying to understand. Again, I've no idea what the backstory was. No idea why they built all those record types. Maybe they built them, then sold a company. Part of the business got moved on. No idea. We've no idea what the backstory is. All we have is the evidence that they laid out in front of us. But there are some very complex orgs there that often have architectures which should probably have been better thought through. And again, it's very difficult to unpick. So I know I'm spending a lot of time talking about the upfront stuff, but this is really important, because if, as DevOps comes in and people go, right, we need to take some time to implement it, this is your chance to try and get some of these best practices in place. If you want to know what the best practice looks like for business analysis, go and have a look at the business analysis certification question lists, the 5 sections around business analysis. It lays this out in terms of what you need to go and do. So again, if you want more evidence putting back into your organization to go, why do we need to do business analysis? The business analysis certification lays out the steps that you need to do before you start building. Okay. Shall I pause there before more for any questions? Okay, how does it take to switch on? Okay, so let's get into DevOps Center. Right, let me just, I'll answer that question in a moment, Megan. Right, so here is the architecture. DevOps Center is on the right. You have the concept of a project work item, and you connect it to your org, both your org production, your sandbox, and your dev orgs. You connect it to a free version of GitHub, and it manages the integration behind the scenes between your work items and orgs and the project metadata. There isn't a synchronization between Jira and Salesforce. Part of what Elements is doing, and part of our integration, is actually being able to drive user stories into DevOps Center, being able to do the conflict analysis, but also we tie Jira to Salesforce. Now, the Jira integration is definitely on the roadmap, because so many organizations need Jira. That, again, no idea of timeline. You can use Enterprise GitHub if that's the cloud version. So for those people who haven't got GitHub, then they can use a free GitHub account, but it's GitHub on the web, not on-prem. So let me just talk to you about some principles of DevOps. I could demo it, but it's probably just as easy to go through some screenshots. So the first thing is you have a pipeline. So again, pipeline, you can't see any dev orgs here because they are to the left of this diagram, but you can have a number of stages in a pipeline. So you define a pipeline, approved work items, UAT, staging, production. You can build multiple pipelines. They're called projects. A project has a pipeline. So you could have a pipeline which is simply dev straight into production, and that is, so sandbox into production, that could be your hot fix. You may have a more complex pipeline, like the one you can see in front of you, for more complex changes. Again, back to products like Elements. Unless you understand the complexity and the risk of user stories, you don't know which pipeline to put them in. So again, it's trying to drive some of those, understanding the risk of changes, understanding the risk of making to be able to understand which pipeline you're going to put stuff through. Okay, so that's the first change that people are going to be confronted with if they're not used to DevOps and they're just change set people. The whole idea of a pipeline. The second thing is a work item. So the really nice thing about a work item is once you create a work item and it has connected to it metadata items that you're going to push through the pipeline, it goes all the way through. You don't have to recreate it every time you move to another phase in the pipeline. Unlike change sets, where you have to create it every time you create a new, you move it to the next sandbox, you then have to build the change set all over again. Only once. You've only got a work item. There are some limitations with work items I'll pick up in a moment, but actually you have a work item. This one's called 41. You would click that and approve it and push it through the stages. So here is your list of all the work items. You can see what they are about. You can see what status they are. You can see where they are. So let's just think about how I create a work item. So I create it, we call it something, we put a description in, you can assign it to somebody. You then are asked to connect that work item to an org, a dev org. So again, back to principles, not everybody's in the same org. You should be having multiple sandboxes, one per developer, one per admin. maybe a big change to the way admins work, where they're all in the same thing, tripping over each other. The reason that you want to go and connect a work item to a org is because then you can pull that box there, you can pull changes for this work item from that org, and it will pull everything that's changed since the last time you did a pull. So instead of the change set, go and collect one, go and collect one, go and collect one, it will pull the whole list. You can then either click there and check everything or check individual ones. You can then also go and connect other items. It says connect manually. You can go and get other components. It doesn't know the implications of, say, pulling a flow that you may need to pull some other things. So you have to go and collect all the other things as well, but you can collect those manually. So let me pause there for a moment, because pretty much that's DevOps Center for you. It's a pipeline with a work item. A work item has a set of metadata items, and you push those that work item through, as you can see, in progress. When you click promote, it goes into review. It pushes a GitHub review. You can choose to ignore that. You can then hit promote. It promotes it, and that's pushing from one org to another, and it's doing all the moving of the metadata around behind the scenes, back and forth to GitHub. Megan
asked a question, and I'm curious as well. So in change sets, there's a big validation and dependency flags that you get regularly. Is that still part of this DevOps process?
It is there. Obviously, it is a very limited dependency check, but it does do that. It's doing what a change set does, correct. The other thing that it is doing, though, it is checking that it's able to push. So you may, if you're about to go, let me go back a slide or two. You can see that one has a problem with it, the red one. If I click on there, it will give me a history of all the activity, but it will give me a message that says, I'm sorry, I can't do this. You've got to try and work out why. And an example might be, I'm trying to push a page layout, but the field that's on that page layout hasn't yet been pushed. Okay. One really, really interesting thing they've done is a work item. It could be just, so when you think about change sets, you have to put everything in the change set. A work item could be a subset of those items. So instead of having these change sets with 150 items on them, you could have five work items with 30 on each, or 5 on each. So you can actually have multiple work items moving their way through, all the way through. Now, can you see where it says promote as a work item bundle? At this point, you can then say, when I do a promotion, every single work item that's in this bundle gets promoted at the same time. So this essentially is collecting together all of those different work items and treating them like a release, the same way as you think about putting everything into one change set and moving it all the way through.
And maybe I'm skipping ahead, so sorry, I'm starting to get back into DevOps brain. Is this single pathway only? The merge and back promotions are the question I'm trying to figure out how to ask.
No, they don't exist.
They don't do that, so it's really just a dev up to a prod and not back down?
No, you can have multiple devs, because to the left of here, there are multiple devs. So if you think about this principle here, there, when you create a work item, you're saying which dev environment it's coming from. So you may have 15 devs, but you haven't got branching. You've got multiple devs coming into the first stage in the pipeline, and then after that, it's straight through.
Okay. Can a sibling dev environment, once a work item has been promoted, pull and promote down to pull? So if I'm making changes in my dev, can my sibling dev group, can my sibling dev group ever get access to that work item to promote it into that org? Or can you only go only up? There's no down.
Okay, I think at the moment you can only go up, but they are definitely, as an urgent item, working on how you actually get back, how you make sure everyone is up to date.
Good.
Is every object available?
Everything that's available for change sets. So I know
So
that's
not the metadata API, but change that. So sorry, I didn't know the mute button was going to work. I'm sorry.
that's fine. That's fine. Happy to hear voices. So everything a change set does, and no more at the moment. So
That's
this
big.
is a
That's
change set
really big.
replacement.
Almost everything.
Everything the metadata API can get to. There's some stuff it doesn't get to, but yes.
Whoa. Everything the metadata API can do, or everything change sets can do, because those are separate.
Oh no, I'm sorry. Everything change sets can do.
Okay, thank you.
When you looked at the changes.
Sorry, I can't hear that question at all.
So can't hear me?
I can't.
When you look at the changes, does that show you everything that's changed in Salesforce or just in the object that you're tied to?
So a change set-
So that slide there, oh, sorry, that one there is everything that's changed in that org since that dev org since the last time you did a pull.
So if I'm doing something CPQ, it would show up. If somebody else is doing some of the opportunities, it's going to show up as well in there.
Yeah, but the problem, yes, but at no point can you actually, you can't see if someone's doing work in dev 2 to the same thing.
You can.
But you can see if multiple people are working in the same org, the changes in the same org, no matter what object they're on or what metadata they're on.
Yeah, provided but if someone is in dev 3 making changes.
Sure. No, but you're in the same dev doing things. Okay.
But the concept here is every developer has their own dev org.
Thank you for reinforcing that. That is such an important part of DevOps. Thank you.
Yeah.
You got a little louder in writing, so I can hand that off to a couple of people.
So the
Really quick, really awkward question. How does it work with the experience bundle where it's a single metadata piece, but it's really multiple metadata pieces? Do you see all those individual changes, or do you just see the experience bundle changed?
I'm afraid I have no idea.
No worries. I didn't think anybody would. I doubt even Salesforce would
I mean,
be able to answer that question too.
Okay, anybody can start to use DevOps Center. I guess it's a chance to go and see what it pulls.
It's been in dev, so I'll let you know tomorrow. Yeah.
Okay, all right. What else was I going to say? So, a couple of things about some of the limitations at the moment. First of all, Salesforce has built this as it's almost like a managed package. You install it straight out of setup. So you simply go to the quick find box in setup, type DevOps Center, and it installs an app into your org. Now you have to decide where you install it. It doesn't care where it's installed. It just needs a home so it can manage things. In a or one. Yeah, you can install it anywhere. The suggestion is you install it in production. It doesn't take up the way they've built the licensing is it's not taking up, you don't need extra licenses just so you can run DevOps Center. So you would install it in an org somewhere so that you have access to it. And then you simply get to it. It looks like another, it just looks like another app, rather like Sales Cloud or Service Cloud or whatever. And then you can set permissions about who can see it, who can use it, who can see it. So who can push things through, who could be the release manager type role. The implementation is you do that. You then need to build the pipeline. I tell it about the orgs. You need to get a GitHub account and connect it to GitHub. So there's a pretty good set of instructions that Salesforce has built for installation and getting it working. We've worked with them to build an implementation guide, implementation being different from installation. And at the end of the presentation, there's a QR code so you can get to that implementation guide. So the implementation guide is talking about lots of things that I've been talking about. and again, there's a slide at the end and we can circulate that document. How do you pick a release manager? Well, you need someone who actually is responsible for being able to have an overview of all of those changes and is starting to think about what sequence we're driving them through. So if you're a one admin shop or a two admin shop, then it's going to be one of the two of you. DevOps Center will scale all the way down to a one-person organization. They ought to be using it rather than change sets. So they'll end up having multiple roles the same way as they do at the moment. They're developer, they're admin, they are pushing releases through change sets. That release manager should be, the more senior, the better, I would suggest, because they need to have an overall view and understand the implications of pushing those changes. I think the Salesforce admin term is very demeaning. When I started 20 years ago, it wasn't admin. All you did was add users and make a few changes. I think admins should now be thinking like product managers, and the product manager would then have a release manager responsibility or have a release manager report to them. And I've been on my soapbox trying to get the business analysis certification out, and with there, my new soapbox is product manager, trying to get people to think like product managers rather than thinking like, oh, I can put that change in right now. So I think, did that answer the question? I think, again, it's back release manager. You need to be as senior as, you need to find someone who actually is not in the weeds of making the changes, because they need to start to think about the implications of making a change. It's not, did that code run, but it's, have we changed the business processes? Have we put the training in place? Are there as in people organization changes before we push that release? Is the training in place? There are a whole set of implications of making that release, pushing that release in. We're being asked inside our application around release to have the ability to put checklists. What are the other things that actually should need to go live before we can push this change? So let me try and summarize where we've got to, if I may. So we've got the concept of pipelines, the concept of a work item being pushed, having a series of metadata types connected to a dev org being pushed through a pipeline. So a couple of things that DevOps Center doesn't do at the moment, might do in the future. The first is this concept. So the idea, this is, by the way, this is an Elements right panel job popped into DevOps Center, but I want to use it to explain some principles here. Number one is there is no integration to a Jira ticket. So if you're using Jira, you're going to have to manually keep track of work item 14 is Jira ticket XYZ. That's the first thing. The second thing is, once a work item is on its journey through your pipeline, it cannot change. You can't add things to it. You can't go back a stage. It's a ratchet, which is bigger than mouse shit. Anyway, it's a ratchet. You can only go forward. Sorry, that was an engineer joke. That means that this example here, if you've picked up a bug in work item 13 and you want to push the bug changes through, you need to create a new work item. As DevOps Center exists at the moment, there is no connection between work item 13 and 14. There's no knowledge. And then the last piece is there is no way of understanding that the metadata on item work item 13, 14, 22, all of those actually may be multiple work items are touching one metadata item. So there's no upfront conflict checking. I'm sure there will be in the future, but where we currently stand, that doesn't exist. So you either use Elements. If you don't want to use Elements, then you need to understand the implication of what's happening here when you're putting DevOps Center in. Now, as developers, you may not it may not be your problem, but if you've got admins starting to do this, they will never inevitably come to you and say, "You're the expert on DevOps. Help me understand how we work our way through this." Again, back to the DevOps Center guide we wrote with Salesforce. Talks about all this in some detail. Can I overwrite a work item? No, you can't. Once a work item exists, it exists. You can't go back. You have to create a new work item. So work item, in my example here, work item 13 is all made it all the way through to production. It stops there. Right. I found a bug. I've got to create work item 14, connect it to a dev org, push it those changes all the way through, and then 13 and 14 you need to know that they are together. Either you've got to do that manually somehow, or use something like us to connect it together. Contrast to this to GearSet, Flowsum, AutoRabbit, Capado. Chalk and cheese. No, baby steps is a better way of putting it. This is getting people on the path to understanding DevOps principles, pipelines, source control, pushing things through a pipeline and having a release manager. Those concepts maybe are quite alien to most admins and most organizations out there. This is getting people on the path. If people are looking at this and going, like, how do I back promote? How do I back up? How do I do conflict checking? That's why people will then spend like significant amounts of money on a proper DevOps, on a more sophisticated DevOps product, like a GearSet, like a Capado, like a Flowsum. But this is, again, targeting 70,000 people out there using chain sets. And many of those will then go, I'm on the path to using a more sophisticated product. In fact, a senior guy at Capado came up to me at Dreamforce and went, why are you talking about DevOps Center? I thought you were a partner. It's like, fine, cool, jets, mate. There are 70,000 people who won't be buying Capado, and they will never buy Capado if they don't understand the power of DevOps. Once we've got them on the path, they will then potentially be customers longer term. So I think things like DevOps Center will happily coexist for a long time alongside those other products. We're an ISV. We understand the rules. It's like picking dollar coins up underneath a steamroller. There are loads of coins to be picked up, but you got to keep on moving. If you stay still, you get run over. If the current DevOps players don't continue to innovate, eventually DevOps Center will catch up with them, because their customers will be pushing Salesforce to develop more and more functionality inside DevOps Center. At the moment, there's a huge gap. 3 years from now, there'll be a very different story, potentially. So that's just a big list.
How healthy is, and I guess I'm asking you for product information on Elements.cloud, and you feel free to contrast it to the way it works in other DevOps tools besides DevOps Center. The Jira integration. So for me, the holy grail of continuous deployment has to do with functionality being greenlit to go to production at the Jira story level, and not necessarily have to be maintained at the technical aspect. How comfortable do you feel with the Elements.cloud DevOps Center maturity for being able to say, yep, you can go continuous because all of the technical components are managed and tied to Jira? Or is it much, I know that Jira and Capado and Elements.cloud can also work together. I guess I'm just looking for a maturity or health of those kind of integrations that tie those concepts together for full deployments.
Okay, so I talked about this. This is sort of the sophistication of the integration we built with DevOps Center is as good as it can be based on what DevOps Center does. You can create a user story or a work item inside Elements, and it will automatically generate it inside DevOps Center. So you can be working here going, we are now ready with a user story in Elements. Here are the metadata items that I think need to be on this. It will then create the work item. It will also create the work item in Jira. So that's why they're all connected. And the reason we've got these little purple bits is that when it makes its way into both Jira and into DevOps Center, this right panel, which is all the information coming from Elements, which is, I've only got one tab open, but all the dependencies, the risk, all the background information, the discussions, all the documentation which got created throughout the business analysis phases is now available to DevOps Center, to the devs team, to the stakeholders, and the same picture is available inside Jira because it's linked to Jira. And we're also taking a view about, we can see which metadata items are in which org, so we can tell you where things are. It also means that we've got an overview, which is we can take a look at a metadata item and go, this metadata item is used in multiple work items, i.e. user stories, or across releases, so we can show you the risk that, so if I'm about to go thinking about making changes to a work item with metadata on it, I can start to see the implications of making changes because somebody else is already making changes to those work items. That integration which I've just shown you, is the same that we have with Capado. And in fact, we are re-engineering our integration with Capado based on what we did with DevOps Center.
Okay.
To do some more sophisticated things about pulling metadata items back and forth so we can do better conflict checking up front.
Thank you.
Gear sets, we haven't built an integration yet. We're talking to them, have been for a while, but actually we've got some big customers who want us to build it. Gear sets slightly more difficult because they don't have a concept of a user story or a work item, so there isn't a natural thing to bind to. They do have metadata items, but we're having to go about it a slightly different way. Flowsum a little bit behind in terms of, we've got a few customers coming to us. We haven't got anything with Flowsum nor AutoRabbit. But the Jira synchronization works no matter what you've got. If you have nothing and you've got just Jira and you're doing whatever you want, then we'll connect to Jira.
An integration plan for the code quality tools.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Yeah. And any integration plan with the code quality tools like Sonar or any other tools?
With code quality, there is actually, that's an interesting angle. Let me just go back to this picture. You can see that our right-hand panel has a number of icons, and that obviously pulls up a different right panel, a different section of the right panel, essentially tabs. Our strategy is one of inclusion. So we're talking to the, say, Provar around testing about pulling their test information so it then appears in that right tab. The same for code quality. So people like, you said talk about Sonar, the other one would be Digisec. If people are producing a whole bunch of metadata related content, we'll build a tab and actually pop that in there. So we're not trying to replace it. We'll just say, let's aggregate it. So wherever it is. So Megan's just asked a question back to DevOps Center and related. Does it history check in GitHub or in Salesforce? You're seeing an activity history at a work item level, not a metadata item level in DevOps Center.
And Ian, wherever it makes sense, and I feel bad I didn't give you a very good introduction. I've had a couple of introductions to Elements.cloud, but if you want to give us a quick talk about what Elements.cloud does as a whole, that may help us frame what we're looking at here, please.
Yeah, let me do that briefly. Let's not. I don't want to turn this into a full-on product demonstration, but let me just talk about the principles. So a couple of things. Number one, we don't run on Salesforce. We run on top of AWS. The reason for that is that what we're talking about can be done for any application, any change. So any change could have requirements. So the first thing is we essentially are your spreadsheet of requirements. These are all the requirements at a certain status with priorities, and you can capture requirements or feedback and push those through a pipeline as you start to validate them. So that's the first thing. Any one of these, there's a right panel. This is a particular requirement. This was the priority. There's a status. It's tied to a work item or a user story. There may be some documentation associated with this requirement. So we're, first of all, with a database of requirements, you would then validate those requirements by mapping business processes. You can draw architecture diagrams. One of the announcements at Dreamforce is a strategic partnership between Elements and Salesforce. So now architecture diagrams, the architecture standard that Salesforce has, you can now build inside Elements. The power of that is that you can, I know, you've got all the power of linking, drill downs, version control. So, I mean, this is an ERD. I'm not allowed to edit this, I don't think, probably not. So this is the published version, but I could start to see the history of how it's changed over time. There's a draft version. I could go back and change. I could link this particular object to an object in a metadata in the metadata dictionary. So think of this not as the lucid chart pretty diagram, but think of it as an enterprise application tool because of all the connections. Okay. You can draw process maps in Elements. So you can start to map out your business processes. Let's open up one of these. Hierarchical drill downs. So here is a process diagram. I want to know actually how that step works. I can drill down to the next level of detail, link to supporting information, follow-up actions, and then any of these diagrams can be inserted into Salesforce or into any other application. So let me just so far capture requirements, validate those requirements with process maps, with architecture diagrams. So therefore you can get your user stories. So you start creating user stories. There's a user story. As an account manager, I want to be able to blah, 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 blah. And there's this panel that you saw in DevOps Center. So this is the information. I could start to put some level of risk assessment on it. I can start adding the metadata items, which I think are going to change. And I can see which orgs that metadata is in.
I know that data is actually talking directly to your Salesforce org. Is the architecture mapping as well?
The architecture mapping is talking directly to our metadata dictionary, which is connected to the org, yes.
Outstanding.
Okay.
Saved for bacon on a project recently, so thank you for Elements.cloud's help recently on a named project pulling data dictionaries for a client. So I know we've taken advantage of your kindness and your cooperation with the architecture community on several projects. So
I'm very happy to do that. I mean, we're huge fans of what's happening in the architecture space. Here, this again, work item, you can see we're pulling the metadata to understand where it is based on DevOps discussions and so on. Let's get to the bit that everyone gets excited about, and let's just go and have a quick look at a metadata dictionary. So this is what we pulled from an org. Let me just go to the top. So you can see we're pulling all the Apex classes, all the metadata, so we're basically building this dictionary of everything that's in your org, all your Apex classes. So I select an Apex class. We're pulling as much information as available on the metadata dictionary. And this right-hand panel is available for every single metadata item. So this is the details about it, which stakeholders are important to it. What suggestions? This is the suggestion for tech debt cleanup. Okay, the history of the suggestions as it went through to be deleted. Where is this used? It's used in another Apex class. It's used in another Apex page. What documentation is associated with it? Which user stories changed it? What's the change log? Where are the discussions? So let's go to somewhere more interesting. Let's go and find an object. Let's go and find the opportunity object. As you can see, it's you just open these up, open it up, open up the object. The quick way is just to do a search, but I rather like to show you what's in here. Right, here's an object. Bear in mind, we're pulling this metadata every day. We've analyzed to date 15 billion metadata items. So here is everything about the opportunity object. How many custom fields, how many list views, how many records by record type. We look at every single field and tell you how important they are, not just if they've got data, but how important they are. We do a whole bunch of stuff around in-app help as well. So if I look at this tab, this is telling me how well populated every single field is. Bear in mind, we're pulling this for every org every night. And we're also telling you where this thing's used. So Apex, oh, hang on, Celonis, that's an external system. So we're connecting to external systems as well. It's not just what's in Salesforce. If this was connected to NetSuite, to Tableau, to Slack, to, in this case, Celonis, to your custom app, you can make those connections. Let me just go down one little bit further. We're now down at field level. You can start to see the impact of the field. Just because we deleted a field in Salesforce doesn't mean you've lost all the history of why it was there. Yeah, well, let's find an, I want to go down to stage. Also, by the way, you can create proposed items. So you're in the business analysis phase, you create a proposed field, a proposed Apex class, a proposed record type. You can start documenting it, doing all the analysis. When that particular metadata item appears in the org, we'll then connect it, and therefore all the documentation then appears connected to that metadata item. So you don't have to wait until it's in Salesforce to document it. You can do it right here, and then we'll make the connection. Right, stage. So there you are, there's the stage. You can see the stage is a pick list, so it's got loads of pick list values. You can obviously analyze and document pick list values, but let's do a stage level. Same information, 28 active pick list values. You can even update the Salesforce help text from here. Right, let's have a look at this. We're now looking at how populated this field is by all the record types. We're actually telling you how populated pick list values are. So you can start thinking about getting rid of pick list values. We also tell you where pick list values are used. So if it may be empty, but you can't just delete it because it may have implications. But then we're telling you everywhere this field is used. It's used in one Apex class, 2 of these Celonis external links. No, 29 flows. You get the idea, okay? And it uses a value set. What's interesting is taking a look at that visually. So there's the field stage. Here's the right-hand panel, but now it's showing me all these things. So I could say, actually, talk to me about those 29 flows. Okay, right, so that flow there, oh, well, okay, it's used on a Lightning page, which is used on the space record page. And again, if I want to know about that, click on that and the right-hand panel will now update. But it goes a bit further. It's used in a custom object, which is, okay, right. So now you can start to see the implication of making changes. The beauty of it is I could go to any one of these and go, right, I now need to go and add it to a user story. I may be doing a piece of work on field stage, but I can work my way around this, adding these metadata items to the user story. Because you suddenly realize that actually we need to include that in a change. And as I said, this doesn't have to be just Salesforce. That item there, Celonis make, I'm now pulling this information is now coming from a completely separate metadata dictionary associated with Celonis. So you could build a metadata dictionary for Tableau, for custom app, for NetSuite, for SAP. Those connections can be made. So suddenly you're getting visibility outside Salesforce of the implication of making a change inside Salesforce. And it could be at a field level, or it could be at a pick list value level. So once you've done all of that, you've then got let me just see if I can find one for you. And this is the last bit I'll show you before everyone's brains explode. Releases. See if I can find a release. You can create a release. You can then add to a release. Again, I'm no idea. This is not a demo environment. I'm just looking at what I've got. Okay, this release has got a whole series of process diagrams that need to be updated. So we're pushing changes to process. It's got a whole series of user stories tied to it, hopefully. So these are all the user stories tied to this release. And I can then look at it from a metadata perspective and say, it will then tell me if any of these have got conflicts, because this one item of metadata is shared between user stories or shared between releases. So this is the upfront conflict checking before we start getting into heavy builds where we're now burning cycles and spending a lot of time and money. So this is all the upfront analysis I talked about. We've made it so we're doing as much as we can of the heavy lifting for you because we're doing all the analysis. The obvious questions are, how easy is it to get going? And it must be too expensive. For the consultants in the room, one license for one consultant to do all of this for every single customer is $500. So you can use this for org discovery, statement of work, upfront analysis to win work, or you can use it at a client. While you're at the client, you can use your license. When you leave, if the customer wants it, the customer pricing is 5% of what they spend on Salesforce. So just one short customer story. They were about to migrate from Aptus to CPQ. They had allocated 5 people for a month to do the analysis on the core objects, 800 man hours. With Elements, they did that analysis in 1 hour. So that's probably my best ROI story. But there are a bunch of videos on our website of customers saying, I know, org discovery for a consultant, you can do it in a third of the time. Pulled out 18 managed packages in under a day without breaking anything. So this is changing the game for the upfront analysis, but also obviously from a dev perspective, just understanding what we're breaking, what changes we're making. I'll stop there. Thank you for giving me the platform. Just have a quick talk about what Elements does. We're clearly very excited. So are our customers. So are Salesforce, because they are recommending us into their customers.
There's a lot more under the hood than the last time I saw Elements.cloud. That's cool.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, we've got a team of 25 in the development team, and they're pretty impressive what they're putting out. Where are we going next? I'm not sure it's live. It's probably in the next week or so. It'll be live. We're pulling all the event logs. So a metadata item, we can tell you not just where it's used, but who used it and how often and when. So if you've got event monitoring switched on in your org, connect it instantly, you get that access to that content. You get the last 30 days analysis straight in. So we can start to produce this kind of stuff. No, not that one. Not that. Not that. Where are we? So I'm just trying to find so you can start to do some sort of analysis like this. Tell me some trends. Tell me what happened to stuff. This is just about changes to metadata, but we're building the same sort of functionality so you can see which things got used most frequently. So you can start to make some, but it's all about making better decisions about change. And again, Megan asked about tracking changes. We track every metadata change. You can see that in the right-hand panel. So again, we're trying to aggregate as much information as possible so you actually have a complete view about what you're trying to deal with. I'll stop there. I'm happy to take questions on DevOps Center or obviously our Elements. I'm happy to do that. But other thoughts and questions about DevOps Center? I think, as Paul said, it probably now you see this, you understand the why it makes sense to connect it to DevOps Center and why we built the integration.
Yeah, that's where you were going. For Elements.cloud, the DevOps integration is just one tendril of your product owner dashboard that Elements.cloud does.
Correct. yeah, so it really is, it's just the touch point over here. The integration probably took very little time to build it probably took longest. We had no help from Salesforce. They were too busy. We worked out how DevOps Center worked out the data model, built the integration, got it working in probably a couple of weeks.
Well, this is great too so everybody, I didn't do a great job of introducing the owner, founder, and CEO of Elements.cloud, who's, as you can see, has a lot of architecture and big picture perspective into Salesforce. Ian has also been a huge supporter of the architecture community at large, so I know him from there. If you've got any questions about DevOps Center or about an architecture dashboard, or the founder of a doing very well company, like I said, Accenture, I know, has been looking into and working with Elements.cloud quite a bit. So
Both here and in Australia, actually. The Australian guys are Stephen Herod Accenture's doing work with us in Australia as well. So two QR codes up on screen. The left-hand one is the Trailblazer community for DevOps Center, and the right-hand one is that implementation guide I talked about that we wrote. And again, I'll send the links to Paul, so if he wants to circulate them after the event, you can do that.
thank you. Thank you. Any questions, anybody? A lot of information. I don't know where to start. That's great. Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, I think everybody's, we've got a lot of, I love change sets. I love the simplicity, but I'm also somebody who's usually writing code on in production. If I'm looking at code, something bad has happened and it has to be fixed now.
Get it, I get that.
I'm not usually a DevOps person, so I usually check my changes in and somebody else is usually moving them around. And I've had fun with change sets. Once I got the change set helper that actually listed changes. So that's exciting that you can't see what you've changed as opposed to sifting through every element of the org and finding the one that you know you were working on, which is old school change set. So that's great to see. And it's high time that we got some more integration with stories and Jira. The question I would ask for you for Elements.cloud, where do you see the overlap? It looked like there was a lot of story tracking and requirements tracking in Elements.cloud, yet you also have a connection with Jira, which to me does a lot of story tracking and work item tracking. Where do you philosophically, to an idiot as far as DevOps, where do you see that philosophical overlap or exclusion? Okay, so the first thing is Jira is the incumbent. We're absolutely not trying to oust Jira anyway. That doesn't make sense. We see our work, or people using Elements, stops when you get that you've done the business analysis. So the end result is a user story, because that's a work item that you want to put, that you think from an analysis perspective, you think that's the piece of work that needs to be done, which is why we have a bi-directional sync with Jira. So if someone created a work item in a user story or a ticket in Jira, it will end up in Elements. If you create an Elements, it will end up in Jira. And that right panel that you saw in our user story will also appear in Jira. So what we're trying to do is say, if you're doing the work and you're creating the user story, you could create it in Elements, link all that useful analysis that you did in the upfront discovery work. That's now in Jira. Right, the dev team can take it from there. When status is changed in Jira, they will automatically change in Elements. So they're basically two sides of this, looking at two sides of the same thing. So if people change a description, change the title, change a status, change custom fields, that will then push back into Elements, which is being connected. So we're not trying to replace it. We're simply saying there's a natural handover, and anything that got created in Elements will make it into Jira. You could go, actually, we create everything in Jira. Fantastic. There will be an Elements user story appears. So then the business analysts have something to connect it to. We see Jira as quite as pivotal as the route between business analysis and the dev team.
If someone hasn't got Jira, then Elements does a fantastic job, and you can use that connection straight from Elements into whatever your DevOps is. But you've got to be a relatively small organization, probably not to be using Jira. We do have examples of that, because our pricing model scales all the way down. I mean, if you're a smallish organization, minimum is 5,000. It's 5%. So you can be a small organization, use Elements, and you probably wouldn't be using Jira. But for any sensible size organization, and we're dealing with some of Salesforce's largest customers, yeah, it's Jira, and we need to make sure we understand how we coexist with that. So the other philosophical thing is, no, we're never going to be building DevOps. Okay, there are great DevOps tools. We know where the line is. We know where we fit. We're everything from idea to a user story. The DevOps players can take it from there. But again, that integration means that they can access all of that valuable metadata insight, all the history of what changes got made, all the documentation they get to see inside the DevOps tool. And then if they make changes and want to add documentation, add it there and push it back. The same way as that right panel that I showed you appears inside Salesforce Setup. So if you're in Salesforce Setup, you get all that right-hand panel information about the metadata that we created, injected into Setup. You don't have to come to Elements. You can be in Jira, you can be in Capado, you can be in DevOps Center, you can be in Salesforce Setup, and you're still accessing all that analysis. So this whole idea of coexisting is really important.
That's great. And the pricing is interesting too, because it's too hard to talk organizations into thinking up front when they're trying to go fast or be cheap, and get things, move the needle. We need to move the needle before we can show value. And that happens too many times iteratively, and you're down a path and you've created so much technical debt from not knowing where you're going, that a little bit of shifting to the left, like you were saying earlier, would be huge. And if you can bite off pieces of planning while you're executing and have that scale with you, that will make for a healthy organization, or healthier organization and product. I like it. Thank you. That's a great one.
I mean, the implementation is connect an org, which takes you 2 minutes. 2 hours, 3 hours later, we've synced an org. So that's not the issue. Quite often, the biggest time in implementation is for us is the 252 questions that a company asks us in a security review. We always get through, but everyone's got a different set of 252 questions. So getting through security review, once you're through that, connecting it to an org, us pulling out the metadata, showing you what you've got there, that's where the magic happens.
I've gotten kind of used to that part. It is the cliff that you fall off after that of, okay, now who do I talk to about who cares about the data I'm helping you manage? Who cares about this data flowing from there to there? Well, maybe the system admin or the guy that runs SolarWinds or the VP of technology. No, I need a stakeholder, somebody who cares about, and it's that master product management philosophy, just like master data management, that's got to grow up together at the same time. And it's nice to see you. Is this making sense for me? Sorry, you were asking a question.
You were just talking about pulling everything into the beginning, planning stage, but realistically, getting those people that are really got the stakeholders that are that vested to actually be involved, then you end up building something that's not what they really need, because they're not 100% thinking of what is possible, right? So you got to be able to. I like the prototype option. You try to prototype as much as you can, give them something, and then pivot and correct it at the other end. But I come to see your point as far as how much time is wasted, but you got to weigh the other side of you developing something that nobody wants.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's what your left shift was, moving much more of that discussion to the head as opposed to let's throw something against the wall and see if it sticks.
So it's my experience. It's a lot harder to get the people involved early on until you have something to show.
Yeah,
I completely agree with that, but that's called prototyping. I'm really happy with the concept. If you've got nothing and you want to try and show the art of the possible, that's called prototyping. But we shouldn't be doing that when someone's going, we need to actually think about multi-currency in our current org, which is connected to our accounting systems. We shouldn't be going, well, we'll have a go at it and see what happens, and then we'll iterate around that. Absolutely prototype, but do that somewhere else, which then you can say, now we've opened your eyes to what's possible. Now let's do a deep dive into what's really required, so we can scope it and then deliver it first time without breaking the org.
Yeah, prior to Accenture, I've been on 2 separate projects. One, we got all the way through a $2 million project and didn't have an understanding of what the actual value was. Like, why did we build this? Nobody could, well, such and so said we needed to have one because other people have one. How did we do all of our requirements without tying back to a single incentive? And then I had another one that I got to pull the brakes on. A handful of key features were delayed and marked for parking lot, and nobody had gone back and looked to see, those are the only reasons a customer would get something out of this tool. There was a lot of stuff we got out of them coming in and working with our tool, but for the effort of them remembering another password and another login to another system, we weren't delivering any of those features that would bring them to us. And so we were still going to finish the project, and there was another 30-40% of the budget that we would have wasted and delivered a product that nobody would ever use. So they slayed it, saved the money, and decided to come back whenever they could do that. But very nearly just drove that bus off the cliff without having any idea that there was no direction to go. So yeah, getting that big picture, tie back all of the traceability of requirements, doing that up front, huge. I get it now. I didn't used to. I used to hate traceability meetings, but I get it now.
Yeah, we had a client who, it was IBM who was implementing it, and 3 months later, Fortune 500 company couldn't write an invoice for 3 months in Europe. 3 separate teams, one on orders, one on delivery, one on invoicing. They didn't talk to each other. They basically collected requirements in spreadsheets, and they went, we haven't got time to do those things. At no point were they ever joined up. The reason they couldn't create an invoice is an invoice needs to be matched against an order and a delivery. They couldn't do the matching, which is why they couldn't raise an invoice. 3 separate teams with spreadsheets of requirements rather than understanding the end-to-end business process. This was a few years back, but luckily they only rolled it out to Europe, so they didn't kill the business, so the US could continue.
What's the name of that role that ties those together? Or that would or should have amongst those teams?
Well, I mean, when you started doing the requirements, you needed to think about the end-to-end business process. So when you start thinking about big organizations like that, there should have been a steering committee, center of excellence, if you will, who was starting to go, okay, over the program manager over all of those teams was going, okay, I need to understand how this pulls together architecturally, but also from a business process perspective. There was no user acceptance testing. At no point did they do the testing that said, how do we get from an order through to an invoice? So it was completely siloed. So it's, and we're back in the same world as that was a Siebel and SAP project, but we're back in the same world now. Salesforce is a hugely capable bit of software, which means we're building enterprise applications, and many of the application disciplines, albeit done at speed because of cloud, need to be put in place. And that you're seeing that with Parker Harris. Parker is spearheading all the well-architected stuff. It's long overdue, but it's great that we're seeing that now.
And so hot take, Agile was designed, I grew up as a developer. I'd always enjoyed all the concepts and all the benefits of the Agile mindset and kind of embraced the, fail fast methodology. But I had my UX cohort tell me that Agile is a process that when you have developers but no leadership, and that's when Agile is more successful. It's how coders get stuff done without really good direction or vision. Because you can just continue to chop wood, and that Agile can actually be terrible for final product and design, because you can iterate off of a cliff or iterate the wrong direction. And unless you've got that steering committee level thinking with the waterfall perspective and bringing those waterfalls back into focus, that Agile can be a huge fail.
Completely agree. I think Agile done badly has actually put these development world back years. The whole idea of Agile is just build stuff. It doesn't matter if it's not right. We'll build it again. We don't need to do analysis. We don't need to do documentation. No, Agile's not that. Agile is about taking smaller chunks of work, sprints, but actually doing decent analysis, making sure things get documented. It's taking smaller chunks of work and doing them so we stay in lockstep with the business. We don't do a 6-month analysis phase and then we start building and the business has moved on. So we need to draw on the benefits of Agile, but make sure we haven't thrown everything else away with it, that we've lost it. So it's interesting. The last 2 or 3 years, we've seen Salesforce really moving up and growing up in terms of the level of sophistication that's required to make it work. It's an enterprise application. We need to think like enterprise architects and build enterprise applications.
It's grown up so much and acquired so much enterprise capability that it can't operate as an application ecosystem anymore. It's a platform and cloud ecosystem now. And you have to bring a new type of thinking to that. So 100%. Might be working on a book related to that. Watch. Anybody else have any questions? Take the opportunity. Oh, great. Ian, thank you again for joining us.
Hey, my pleasure.
Appreciate
Sorry, I
it.
couldn't be there in person. I'll see if I can do that next time.
Yeah, no, soon, please. All right, everybody, I'm going to close off. Thank you again. Ping me in chat, LinkedIn, Twitter, if you've got any questions, ideas for new sessions, and thank you. And we'll talk sometime in November about Dreamforce highlights. I'll get that notification out soon, and then look for our holiday party announcement. And if I don't see you at either of those gatherings, have a good New Year and happy holidays. Thank you all.
Thanks. Bye-bye.